Vodacom has been found guilty of contravening sections of the Consumer Protection Act. Now, between 2020 and 2022, several customers complained that the company denied them the right to cancel their fixed-term contracts. Instead, it imposed a 75% cancellation penalty. Let's talk more about this with personal finance journalist Maya Fisher-French. Maya, good to have you with us this morning. I'm sure so many of our viewers this morning can relate to wanting to cancel your cell phone contract and yet still being told that you need to pay 75% of what you would have paid if you didn't want to cancel the contract. Tell us about what the Commission found regarding Vodacom and their behaviour.
I must say, I put this on social media and my social media just blew up. And I think there's a lot of very, very, very angry people out there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out going forward. I did contact Vodacom, but at this stage, not prepared to make a comment. But basically, this actually comes down to quite an important principle, and that is how much can you charge as a penalty for a broken contract? And in the Consumer Protection Act, it says you have to prove loss. You have to show what was the loss to the company because of this person. So if you consider something like a SIM-only contract, if you can no longer afford to continue with it, which is the case because of the time period is quite important. This was during lockdown when people lost jobs. So somebody has to cancel because they just can't afford it. To charge them 75%, what have you lost in the sense of, have you spent money on this person? Have you, maybe if there's a handset involved, you could do a calculation, but if it's a SIM-only contract. So that is one of the things that came up, and the Commission found that Vodacom couldn't justify a 75% penalty in many cases. They also, and this is a very interesting one, and this is why so many sections of the Act that they've contravened. The other thing is they would not cancel it until they had that full cancellation penalty paid and continue to actually charge the client. And consumers said that they were then forced to sign letters, and they were only given 12 days to do so, to accept the quotation letter, which prevented them from cancelling their contract, which goes against their rights. And I think what's also important is they said, because somebody didn't pay that 75%, so they just stopped paying because they lost their job, and they notified Vodacom and they asked to cancel. Vodacom didn't cancel because the money hadn't been paid. They were then handed over to debt collectors and they were blacklisted. The other thing that came up as well in all of this is that Vodacom does not send communication to customers that their contract would be renewed. So this is another thing that, and also on social media, people are saying, yes, suddenly my contract just renewed without informing me, sometimes at a new rate. So many of these things the Commission has found has gone against the Consumer Protection Act. I think this is important. We need guidance from the tribunal in the specific case about what is possible and not possible, because sometimes, what it's like with acts, they're a little bit open-ended.
But I wonder, Maya, I mean, Vodacom is the one under the spotlight here, and that's because those complaints that were submitted were for Vodacom. But what is the standard industry practice? How are other providers dealing with the cancellation of contracts, and what type of penalties are they meting out? Because I find this quite ambiguous when it says reasonable cancellation penalty. What is reasonable? What is deemed reasonable? And reasonable notice also needs to be given. Seems quite open-ended to me.
Yes, and it doesn't seem to be I've actually been trying to get that information before this, and unfortunately they haven't come back to me, but I have been trying to speak to some people who have contracts, and they're saying to me, well, you're not informed. Nobody actually knows what these are. So I mean, I think Vodacom's was obviously particularly high than some of the other cell phone companies. But so what somebody was saying to me is that they were never informed. In fact, it was only when they asked a few times about what would happen if I can't continue this contract that they were sort of informed. So I think that's one of the other issues. We actually don't know. You have to go through these contracts with a fine-tooth comb. So I think that's the next step, is to start really looking and understanding what are the contracts that people are signing. And I actually looked at my cell phone contract. I'm with MTN, and I couldn't find anything specifically in there, to be honest. And it's a very, very long contract. It's very detailed. And I must be honest, I've never bothered to read it. People don't. So you kind of assume that there's going to be this reasonable behavior, that they're going going to be some sort of reasonable, penalties charged. And I think the other thing is, of course, one does have to take in consideration whether a handset's involved or not. That's going to be a very, very different. If you've bought a handset, you effectively have a credit agreement and you're paying off that handset. There would be a value to that handset, for example. If you borrowed money from the bank to buy the handset, you're not going to have to pay off the handset, right?
That's true. It does change the relationship and the agreement slightly, actually very much, if there is a handset involved. But I wonder, do these findings then impact how the cell phone industry now is going to be conducting and structuring their cancellation policies moving forward? Is this one ruling actually going to affect how things are done across the board for the industry?
I think that is going to, I mean, the Vodacom said to me they're still considering the judgment, but this is, you now have the tribunal, which has found, that this is the penalties are too high, and they've given guidance in terms of what that loss should be, what that penalty should be. So the Vodacom's going to have to consider it, and they've also said that it's possible that consumers who were affected are going to be able to actually get refunds. And apparently Vodacom is already starting to look at refunds for those penalties. So yes, it looks like this is going to actually have an impact going forward. I hope, and I do hope that, to be honest, that the tribunal also starts looking at other areas of cell phone contracts. Because I find things like cell phone contracts, gym contracts, those sorts of ones are the ones we certainly get the most complaints about.
I could literally hear people's ears and see people's ears just standing up when you talked about refunds. So who exactly would be eligible for this refund, and how far back would this date?
So that's what I mean. I got that information yesterday from the National Consumer Commission, and they just simply said to me, yes, people can, they can come and approach the tribunal for their refunds, and but she did say that refunds are underway. So I just need to obviously then. I think you can basically come back during that period of 2021. Sorry, I just wanted to actually quickly check, because she sent me an email just about last night, which I'm actually trying to find quickly. But she did basically say to me that people can check that. So I think if you are affected during that period, then you are able to go and get a refund and request that from the commission. But I think they did mention that Vodacom is in the process of looking at these refunds as well. So I think it's definitely something to find out about. And I think if you are affected, then it's probably worth contacting Vodacom or just keeping an eye out for some further information.
Now, there's a 1 million rand penalty that Vodacom has to pay. Isn't this quite a small amount of money, considering, I guess, the number of people who would have been affected by this? And who exactly does this money go to, and what is it going to be used for?
So the R1 million, I think, will go to the tribunal. It's part of it will go, to the tribunal. It's a fine. But I must say, R1 million. Somebody said that's a slap on the wrist, and I said I think it's less than a slap on the wrist. I think what's going to be important is rather to see what's happening with refunds. Are people who paid that 75% penalty going to get their money back? And I think for me that would be more what we want to be able to see happening, rather than just Vodacom paying a fine to the commission. We need to see the consumers being compensated for this. Sorry, I just wanted to come back to you. Sorry about that question on the refund. So Vodacom has informed the commission that that those who have been blacklisted have been removed. Their names have been removed from the credit bureau. So that's extremely important, because obviously people were blacklisted for this. And consumers who want to claim damages can apply for the certificate of prohibited conduct at the tribunal and proceed to claim for damages. So I think the recourse here is through the tribunal.
Oh, Maya, that is big news for many, many people, especially if it has actually affected your credit rating and you can't get loans and you blacklisted, quote unquote, because of this. So over and above the fact that you can actually get your money back, you can actually have another opportunity to clean up your credit record. Thank you so much. That's a personal finance journalist, Maya Fisher-French.